following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFA coming to you with my latest review, and it is actually a review on the latest Transformers figure I've added to my Transformers collection. Normally I post a video or a photo showing the most recent Transformers figures I've purchased, but I decided to pass on this one, and I'll show you why in a moment. But my most recent Transformers figure, which I'm reviewing without any announcement that I added it to my collection, is the Transformers Megatron G.I. Joe H.I.S.S tank crossover collaborative figure. Now, the main reason I'm starting off the review showing the top of the box is because this copy of H.I.S.S tank Megatron I got off of Amazon, which is where it was officially exclusively sold. I want to say sometime last year around Christmas is when Megatron came out. That's when the reviews of him started to pop up here on YouTube. But this copy was used, and by used, I mean whoever bought this originally, Amazon put the shipping label on there, and when they took it off, the original shipping label, instead of being careful about it, they just yanked it off and destroyed the box. And there must have been a shipping label on the back of the box as well, because that is torn up as well. So unfortunately, the box and the box art, there's unfortunately not much to show since it's damaged, but you basically got product shot of Megatron, and originally this part that got ripped off Megatron's hand was originally extending across the crossover section here to the H.I.S.S tank, which is his vehicle mode. So that's a bit disappointing to see that there, but you do have product photos of Megatron here on the top of the box. The H.I.S.S tank Megatron was the Transformers collaborative figure for the year 2022. I don't think it was the only one, but it's definitely one of the largest. But anyways, but on this side of the box, you've got showing how how the collaborative figure is a crossover with G.I. Joe. You've got the H.I.S.S tank from the forces of Cobra, and there's also a little figure of the Baroness that's included with this box. And I have something to say about the Baroness. Shout out to a good friend of mine, MO Transformers. He found out that I had gotten this figure, and he'd actually been looking on buying a duplicate copy of the Baroness, and I have actually been thinking of selling her off because I primarily got this set just for Megatron and not so much the Baroness, because I've said this a couple of times in the past, but I'll say it again right now. I've never really been too much of a fan of G.I. Joe. The reason why that is because when I was a kid, my parents wouldn't let me play with military vehicles or army men, and they didn't want me to basically think the idea of warfare between humans was something funny or to make fun of. So I've never been too much into G.I. Joe, but they let me get into Transformers due to the fact that when I started collecting them, the Transformers turned into more science fiction looking vehicles. But the handful of ones that did turn into tanks, when I was a kid, I was told I had to buy those myself, so I saved my allowance money. But that's starting to get off topic here. So yeah, this video will only be on Megatron because a good friend of mine bought the Baroness from me, so it was nice to get some money back selling off the Baroness to a friend of mine who I know will take care of the figure. I think he told me that he was going to keep her inside of her box. He already had a copy that he'd already taken out. But yes, so since the video is primarily focusing on Megatron, one nice thing is that at least on the side of the box that when you pull it apart, one half of the box is Transformers, the other half is G.I. Joe. So at least on Megatron's half, the product photo of his robot mode isn't undamaged. Unfortunately, the face of the H.I.S.S tank is taken off right here, but it's here on this side of the box. So I don't know if I'm going to save this box or if I'm going to throw it out completely since it's torn to shreds. I may say one thing I like to do with Transformers boxes, I don't throw them out entirely. I cut out the very back of the box, which has the product photos of the Transformers figure, so I may save this side panel section with the photos of Megatron on it, and maybe I might do the same with G.I. Joe just to have a more prominent photo of the H.I.S.S tank, but you get the idea. So Megatron, according to the back of the box, at least this part wasn't damaged. He transforms back and forth between robot mode and H.I.S.S tank mode in just 28 steps, and if you're wondering why there's sunlight shining on the box here, it's because it's earlier in the day than when I normally do Transformers reviews. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get one more Transformers review done tonight, so I figured right now in the afternoon would be the best time to review G.I. Joe Megatron and get him out of the way. So now that we've showed the box aside, let's take a look at Megatron in his robot mode. Alright, so here is Megatron in his robot mode, he has all his accessory pieces attached to him, and the play gimmick with the crossover section is that not just the Baroness, but I believe 3.5 inches is the height, but 3.5 inch GI Joe action figures can ride on top of Megatron, and they can arm the tank cannon. I put the cannons on backwards since it backwards backwards, so it would be a little more clearance for his head, but it doesn't really matter now. So yeah, here is the H.I.S. tank GI Joe Megatron in his robot mode, and one of the from all the reviews I've seen, with the H.I.S. tank GI Joe Megatron on action figure here, there's not much middle ground for this Transformers figure. Either you completely love this figure, or you completely hate it. The reason why there isn't much middle ground is because Megatron is hollowed out wherever possible. Hasbro and Takara Tomy, the designers, made as much empty space on this figure as they possibly could. One example you can see right here with Megatron's fusion tank. There's no inside to the tank. They hollowed it all out. It's the same thing with the bottom of Megatron's lower arms. I mean, some of these gaps are a result of transformation, but not all of them. All of them, like for instance, one gap, one empty space that isn't hindered by transformation is the inside of Megatron's thighs. So there's no reason for that to be hollow. Same thing with the underside of his fists, not the lower arms, but right here where his fingers are. There's no need for that to be hollowed out. So yeah, it's hollowed out. So because of all the hollowness with him, as far as weight goes, even though Megatron, he pretty much weighs the same size as most leader class Transformers action figures do. So it is disappointing that he has so much hollowed out space to him, and it can be a bit difficult getting Megatron to stand up as well because the way his feet are designed, the tank treads that are dangling off the side of his legs double as the heel spurs because the only part of his foot that he has are the toes. Yeah, this, like I said, I apologize for repeating myself, but there really isn't much to say about Megatron. You either love him or you hate him, and basically the general consensus I've seen from most Transformers fans and also G.I. Joe fans is that people have been waiting since the 1980s to have a proper sized Transformers action figure that transformed into a G.I. Joe vehicle. And unfortunately, the H.I.S. tank Megatron action figure was a complete letdown to that 40-year-old, to the now going on 40-year-old dream of having a G.I. Joe vehicle that doubles as a transformer armor. But who knows? Maybe Hasbro and Takara Tomy learned from H.I.S. tank Megatron and also the Doom Buggy Bumblebee figure that was released also, and maybe they'll improve on the G.I. Joe designs, but who knows? Maybe with all the backlash they've gotten, maybe they decided that G.I. Joe Transformers collaborative figures aren't really a thing, and there isn't much a market for pleasing both G.I. Joe and Transformers fans at the same time. Who knows? But anyways, as you saw right there, Megatron's fusion cannon does fall off at a moment's notice, and that's because due to the H.I.S. tank kibble forming his shoulder armor, the really only space for the fusion cannon was to plug it on Megatron's wrist. Normally it's up on his shoulder or his or the near his elbow. So um, for me personally, the one major gripe I have with Megatron is how enormous his backpack is. You can detach it if you want, but it was a heck of a pain for me trying to attach it to Megatron to show what he looks like fully assembled. So remove and detach and reattach the backpack at your own risk. But yeah, there's a nice hollowed out cylindrical space right there for G.I. Joe figures to put in. The main gripe I personally have with the H.I.S. tank Megatron figure is that the windshield can't rotate 180 degrees. I would have preferred if Hasbro and Takara Tomy would have designed a way for it to hinge all the way up, because it can only hinge outward and downward. And because this is clear plastic, there's a risk that this could snap or break or even crack one day if you're not too careful. Like if you just shove this thing onto the back, if you shove it to the ground, like if Megatron falls backwards, the windshield of the tank mode is what's gonna take the impact of it. So that's my biggest fear with this figure, is the windshield breaking quite easily. So I won't go into articulation because I've seen it in other reviews, but pretty standard ball jointed head, so it can swivel slightly up and down, can rotate left and right 360 degrees. The arms have the potential to go 360 degrees at the shoulder, but it's hindered by the armor from the H.I.S.S tank, particularly the backpack, swivel joint in the bicep, hinged elbows, no wrist articulation. Um, can't tell if he has a waist swivel or not. No, he doesn't, because the waist is stationary area. It's connected to his pelvis permanently. Legs are on ratchet jointed hips, so they can go forward that far, they can go back that far. The legs have the potential to go out to the side, but because of these missile pods hanging off of Megatron's utility belt, it's that hinders the leg articulation. Swivel joint in the thighs. Very heavy ratcheted knee joints, or at least they are, or swivel joints, I should say. But yeah, right out of the box, they're extremely stiff, and that crack I just heard, it has me aching, aching here, even though I took Megatron out of his box just today. And then the feet can go up and down at the toes, but that's really due to transformation. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all there is to say about G.I. Joe Megatron. And he's Megatron with his tank armor all around him in exchange for having all his body parts hollowed out. So pretty much the only positive feature that the G.I. Joe his tank Megatron on figure has going for it is its impressive size. And that's the main reason I got it, is because as far as size classes go, his tank Megatron, he's right in between the size of leader class and commander class Transformers figures. He could easily pass for being a small commander class size Transformers figure, but if you want to go the opposite end, then he's probably the largest leader class figure that has been released in recent times, and that was the selling point that made me decide to get this figure a couple of days ago and add him to my Transformers collection. The main reason I got this version of Megatron was to have a Megatron figure stand opposite of this Transformers action figure. This is the Takara Tomy exclusive Generation Select Star Convoy. And long story short, in Takara Tomy's extended storyline of the Transformers Generation 1 series, this is Optimus Prime when he was brought back to life, I believe either for the third or fourth time. And this was his Optimus Prime's final form at the very end of Transformers Generation 1. I know the Autobots brought Optimus Prime back to life because Megatron, when he was Galvatron, came back to life as well. When he was Galvatron, he lost a fight with Ultra Magnus in the Headmasters cartoon series, and Galvatron became buried under a glacier. But then sometime later, he managed to absorb some energy into his body, which brought him back to life. And he decided that since he failed as Galvatron, and he would go back to Megatron, but he would add the word super to his name, so he became known as Super Megatron. Takara Tomy did also release a official Super Megatron figure to go with Star Convoy in the Generation Selects line, but the Super Megatron figure that was released, it was a retool of Titan's Return Voyager class Galvatron, and it's shorter than Star Convoy is. And from what I saw on the photos of the comic books featuring Super Megatron and Star Convoy, Super Megatron was bigger than Star Convoy was, so that's the main reason. That was my main motivation for getting the H.I.S.S tank Megatron figure, was to stand opposite of Star Convoy. Okay, so yeah, now I have a proper sized Megatron figure to go with that. Granted, I know this thing is nowhere near accurate at all compared to Super Megatron. For instance, he had a spaceship for a vehicle mode, not a tank. But as far as how large Megatron action figures are, the H.I.S.S tank Megatron figure is definitely the largest. For a size comparison with another Megatron figure that's been repainted quite a lot in recent years, here is the Siege Megatron figure. This specifically is the Netflix spoiler pack version. So yeah, that's how large H.I.S.S tank Megatron is compared to most of the Voyager class figures of Megatron we've gotten in recent times. When this figure was first revealed, everyone thought that it was a retool of Siege Megatron, due to the head sculpt and the design of the robot mode chest being near identical to Siege Megatron, but everyone was surprised when it was announced that it wasn't a retool of Siege Megatron. It was an entirely new Megatron figure, twice the size of the Siege figure. So, unfortunately, size is what this figure has going for it. Alright, so as far as I've seen Transformers fans who are more Transformers fans than G.I. Joe fans have said, as far as the success of this figure being a crossover figure, This figure was first and foremost designed to be a G.I. Joe H.I.S. tank, and the Megatron robot mode was an afterthought, because once you get this figure transformed into vehicle mode, the H.I.S. tank does a fairly successful job of looking like an official non-transforming G.I. Joe H.I.S. tank figure. So yeah, the designers designed this figure based on accuracy to the H.I.S. tank and not so much Megatron. So the vehicle mode from the other reviews I've seen is the better of the two modes. So since I've just said that, let's get this figure transformed into vehicle mode. We'll look at the H.I.S. tank and then wrap up the review from there. Alright, so I apologize, but I didn't notice in the instruction sheet and the photo on the back of the box until now, but Megatron does have proper heel spurs on him. I just, from out of the box, I didn't realize that, so I apologize. So, yeah, there are the heel spurs for Megatron's legs, so apologize for not having him mistransformed while I looked at him in robot mode. But yeah, it's not much of an improvement as far as stability and Megatron's legs are, because um, for because I did have him standing successfully well with the heel spurs not flipped out. So pretty much all it does is just visually give him a better looking feet. So let's get on to vehicle mode. Alright, and so here is H.I.S. Tank Megatron transformed into his alt mode of the H.I.S. Tank from G.I. Joe. So yeah, pretty nice looking tank mode. You've got 4 Cobra symbols. You got 1 here at the base of the tank turret. You got 2, right here, 1 on either side, and you got 1 here on the back. There is one part forming where this part of Megatron that was a shield in robot mode, you do have to plug it onto the back here and have it become the back of the tank, just like so, because that's the only way you'll hide Megatron's face. So if you lose this, Megatron loses the ability of being a robot in disguise. But considering the fact that, like most G.I. Joe vehicles, the H.I.S. tank is a vehicle that I don't know if it exists in real life or not. If there's any off-roading tanks that look like this, I personally haven't seen any. So since it's a vehicle of science fiction, it doesn't really matter too much if Megatron's a robot in disguise. Then you've got again, I'm not a GI Joe fan here, so this is an amateur pointing out the other paint apps on the tank. You've got 788 up here. You've got this symbol right here, which I believe is showing you that the tank moves forward this direction. Actually, then you've got a little sticker right there. My camera's blurring it, but it's basically the number 3, and then it has a space, and then it has the number 63 on it. So you can angle it right there. Yeah, there's the light not catching it. And you've got H.I.S.S, and then you've got down here, my camera's blurring that sticker again, but it's a blue letter V inside a blue frame, and the light's not, my camera's not letting the light catch it. And then on both sides, you've got the same thing written next to it. You've got HS13-KM621553, and then underneath PN-15-R. I know HS probably stands for H.I.S., so this is probably H.I.S. tank number 13. And I don't know if the K stands for Cobra. I thought Cobra spelled with the letter C, just like the real life snake does, but again, yeah, since I'm not a G.I. Joe fan, I don't know the relevancy of those symbols. I do have enough knowledge on G.I. Joe, from G.I. Joe to recognize the Cobra faction symbol, so at least I know that. But yeah, there's 4 little plastic wheels on the bottom of the tank mode, so you can get it to roll around on a flat surface, but don't count on it rolling at a super fast speed due to how tiny these little plastic wheels are, and they are pegged on, so there is a risk that if you decide to slide this across a surface in the wheel, you'll snag on something that could cause the little wheels to fall off, so that's a bit of a pain with that. Anyways, you can rotate the tank 360 degrees, both left and right, and again, there's the same space in there, so if you decide to use the Baroness figure that this came with, or any G.I. Joe, any 3.5-inch G.I. Joe figures, you can have up to 2 forces of Cobra arming in the H.I.S. tank. You can have 1 on the tank turret, and then you can have 1 sitting in the cockpit. There's some nice detailing in there. You got a joystick for the control panel, and then you got some other control panels here. You got some buttons, I believe, on the dashboard. Some of a lot of the detailing's just the inner parts for Megatron's shoulders. But there's very vaguely a space for a chair carved on there. So again, since I'm not into GI Joe, I just got this figure to stand opposite my Star Convoy figure because this is probably the physically largest Megatron figure that's been released, I believe, within the last 2 or 3 years. And that's pretty much the only reason I got this H.I.S.S tank Megatron figure was the size of the robot mode. But yeah, as far as G.I. Joe vehicles go, I've seen G.I. Joe fans and Transformers fans say that it is accurate to the H.I.S.S tank. How accurate it is to other G.I. Joe vehicles, or if it's in scale with them, I honestly cannot say. There's two little, I believe these are 4mm pegs sticking off the back of the platform. So I said a moment ago you could have two G.I. Joe figures on here, but technically that's what these pegs are for. They're for the bottom of the feet of G.I. Joe figures. So you could actually have up to 4 members of Cobra operating the H.I.S.S tank. You could have the Baroness, Cobra Commander, and I forgot the one silver guy's name from G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe fans, please forgive me for not remembering his name. Destro, I just looked it up. So yeah, if you wanted to, you could have the Baroness, Cobra Commander, Destro, and I guess another Cobra Trooper who they'll probably sacrifice to G.I. Joe just to get away. Writing on here. So yeah, there's up to 4 G.I. Joe figurines that you can have on the H.I.S.S tank. Or if you wanted to, you could have the Baroness and Cobra Commander, and then you could have 2 Joes sneaking onto the back of the H.I.S.S tank to try and stop them. One nice thing, and I don't know if it works again because I don't collect Joes, but the part of Megatron's robot mode chest as to rotate it up for his tank mode, and it has a trailer hitch on here. So if you have any more weapons on here, you can have Megatron towing it for Cobra Commander. And I always chuckle at the idea of Megatron working with Cobra Commander due to the fact that in the 1980s G.I. Joe cartoon series, Cobra Commander was voiced by Chris Latta, the same guy who voiced Starscream in the original Transformers Generation 1 cartoon. And so Megatron partnering up with Cobra Commander, you can make a joke about that today due to Chris Latta providing the voice for Cobra Commander. So Chris Latta basically voiced the number 2 villain in the Transformers series, but he voiced the number 1 villain of the G.I. Joe series. So yeah, that's one of the great legacies of Transformers and G.I. Joe was Chris Latta providing the voices for both Starscream and Cobra Commander back in the 80s. May he rest in peace. So yeah, like I said, it's a pretty impressive looking H.I.S.S tank. This tank here, I believe it is meant to be in scale with the Doom Buggy Bumblebee crossover G.I. Joe figure that was released right after Megatron was Bumblebee released before? I can't remember. I haven't really been following up with the Transformers Collaborative series figures lately because they haven't really interested me as much as the ones did when they first started, such as Ectotron from Ghostbusters or Gigawatt from Back to the Future. And yeah, so again, it is a behemoth compared to other Transformers action figures. For a size comparison in vehicle mode, I apologize, I won't be bringing out Star Convoy since it's difficult to transform that figure. But for a size comparison, here he is next to Siege Megatron again, and this is the original Siege Megatron figure. It was easier for me than trying to transform the Netflix Megatron figure. But yeah, here's a standard Voyager class Megatron figure with the G.I. Joe H.I.S.S tank Megatron. So yeah, he's in between the size of a leader class and commander class Transformers figure. I personally am leaning more towards him being commander class size due to just how enormous he is, despite his hollowed out parts, which are primarily made to incorporate 2 G.I. Joe figures, one in the cockpit and one in the gun turret. Due to how Megatron transforms, that's why he has so many hollow parts due to his shoulder joints end up forming the entire cockpit section of the H.I.S.S tank, while the main section right here transforms into the backpack. So you could argue that you could remove Megatron, the inner section of Megatron's lower legs, along with his the bottom section of his robot mode chest below the trailer hitch, and you could have a proper H.I.S.S tank figure from this mold. But yes, as I said, Ed, I apologize for continuing to repeat myself. I pretty much feel like I've said all there is to say about this. This figure was first and foremost designed to be the H.I.S. tank from the G.I. Joe series, and it was designed to be a figure of Megatron. Second, evidence of this can be seen by the Cobra faction symbol being right up here and the Decepticon symbol being down here. That was a bad joke. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. So as far as I don't know if I said this at the start of the video, but another reason why I decided to pick up this figure was because it was a used copy. Amazon was selling it for just $60, and G.I. Joe Megatron, brand new, when he first came out, he retailed for $100 on Amazon. So getting this almost 50% off was one of the motivators for me to add this to my Transformers collection, because I figured for as impressive, for as large of a figure he is, $60 might be worth it. So, for the proverbial question of the view, do I recommend getting the H.I.S.S tank Megatron collaborative crossover G.I. Joe figure and adding it to your Transformers collection? Action. Well, here's the thing. I only recommend you get this figure if you're a fan of G.I. Joe and you like the H.I.S.S tank vehicle from the forces of Cobra, and also if you like having a large-sized Megatron figure in your Transformers collection, then I recommend getting this figure. But if you don't really like the idea of a H.I.S.S tank vehicle that transforms into Megatron, and you don't like the overall design of this Transformers figure, then this is a pass. As I originally had no plans whatsoever on getting H.I.S.S tank Megatron, but I looked around my Transformers collection, and again, the main reason I got this figure was to stand opposite Star Convoy to use as Super Megatron due to its enormous size. Nice, but apart from that, there really wasn't much motivation to getting this figure, so I only recommend getting this figure if you're both a die-hard Transformers fan and die-hard G.I. Joe fan. And so, yeah, that's pretty great there. As far as the question you guys might asking, since I sold the Baroness figure to a friend of mine, will I get a replacement Baroness figure? No, I will not, because as again, I'm not really a fan of G.I. Joe, so unfortunately, I don't have the desire to buy G.I. Joe figures to store inside Megatron's H.I.S.S tank mode. So it pretty much does all it wants to do for me being a large Megatron action figure. So it's not top tier list. It's not a must-have Transformers action figure. It's only for the most die-hard Transformers and G.I. Joe fans, in my opinion. So as far as being a must-have Transformers figure, G.I. Joe H.I.S.S tank Megatron is not one of them. None of them. He is an easy pass if you don't like the overall design of the figure and you feel the prices that he goes for on the internet isn't really worth it. So thank you guys all so much. This has been the T Fangy. This is my review of the Transformers G.I. Joe Collaborative H.I.S.S tank Megatron action figure. I only recommend you get this figure if you're a fan of both Transformers and G.I. Joe. If you're a fan of just G.I. Joe, the figure, like I said, was designed first and foremost to be a H.I.S.S tank figure. So if you don't mind Decepticon logo from the Transformers series sticking on the back of this, yes, you don't mind the bottom of the H.I.S.S tank looking like the legs of a robot underneath, and this is a pretty decent H.I.S.S tank figure. But for those of you who are strictly Transformers fans and you aren't too much into G.I. Joe, I only recommend this figure if you're an absolute die-hard Megatron fan. If you're not, and you enjoy other Transformers villains more than Megatron, or if you think that this figure is just a lousy Megatron figure, then this figure can be an easy pass. So thank you guys all so much, and until next time, you guys stay safe, stay healthy. I apologize for the glare from the sun behind me this whole time. Next time I'll remember to close my window if I film during the day. But quick announcement: I start a new job tomorrow, and it's a full-time job where I work Monday through Friday all day long. I at least in my new job I get weekends off and I get federal holidays off. So this is the type of job I've been wanting to get, where I don't have to work on the weekends. So any and all future reviews I record will most likely be uploaded either Friday or Saturday night if I'm up to it. I'm super far behind in my Transformers reviews. It was the sun shining on the Transformers action figures that I still have to review, and I'll just move my camera over here. Take a look at that stack of Transformers Legacy figures that I have up here. Those are all, and even the boxes behind those. On those. So I have about 45 Transformers action figures I still have to review, and some of them are boxed sets, so I want to say I have close to 55 individual Transformers action figures to look at. So thank you guys all so much, and until next time, you guys stay safe, stay healthy, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.